February 20th, 1945. Northern Sector, Iwo Jima. The second day of hell. Japanese defensive positions watched as strange American tanks approached through the volcanic ash, black smoke trailing, not from damage, something different. The vehicle's turret traversed toward a concrete bunker, and where the main gun should have been, there was something else. A modified barrel, a nozzle. Then came the sound. A mechanical hiss like compressed air escaping. In the next instant, a torrent of burning fuel erupted across 150 yards of volcanic ash, engulfing the neighboring pillbox in napalm-thickened death. The screams lasted only seconds. Japanese defenders reached for field telephones to report what they had witnessed. 8 modified Sherman tanks, equipped with flamethrowers, weapons the Japanese defenders had never encountered, weapons that would transform the nature of combat in the Pacific War's most brutal battle. Lieutenant Koshi Yamada, manning an observation post in the northern sector, watched in horror as liquid fire poured into a bunker that should have been impregnable. His hands trembled as he lifted the field telephone to report to regimental headquarters. What none of them knew was that these machines represented months of secret development at Schofield Barracks in Hawaii. Top-secret modifications by Navy Seabees working around the clock. The marriage of American industrial capability with battlefield necessity that would produce what one Marine Battalion commander would call the best single weapon of the operation. The Battle of Iwo Jima had entered its second day, and the mathematics of death were about to change dramatically. These 8 tanks would account for over 30% of Japanese casualties through incineration. The Imperial Japanese Army had spent an entire year transforming Iwo Jima into the most formidable defensive position in the Pacific. 8 square miles of volcanic rock had been converted into a fortress that defied conventional military doctrine. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, appointed to command the island's defense in June 1944, understood with crystalline clarity that he could not defeat the Americans. His mission was fundamentally different. Make the capture of Iwo Jima so costly that the United States would reconsider invading the Japanese homeland. Kuribayashi had studied the failures at Saipan, Peleliu, and the Philippines. Traditional Japanese defensive tactics meeting the enemy at the water's edge, launching massive banzai charges, had proven catastrophically ineffective against American firepower. The general made a revolutionary decision that broke with centuries of samurai tradition. There would be no glorious charges, no warriors seeking honorable death in open combat. Instead, his 21,000 men would fight from underground, turning Iwo Jima into a subterranean killing field. By February 1945, Japanese engineers had completed 11 miles of interconnected tunnels with plans for 17 miles total. The completed sections reached 7 stories deep into volcanic rock. 5,000 caves and underground chambers had been carved out, many large enough to hold 300 to 400 men. 1,500 fortified positions dotted the landscape, concrete bunkers with walls 4 feet thick, reinforced with steel rods, crowned every strategic height. Each position was carefully sited to provide interlocking fields of fire. Every inch of the island's surface could be swept by Japanese guns, hidden behind steel doors that opened only to fire, then sealed shut against retaliation. At Schofield Barracks, Hawaii, 5 months before the invasion, Colonel George F. Unmucht, assembled a team that would revolutionize armored warfare in the Pacific. Unmarked, a career Army officer with 44 years of military service, commanded the U.S. Army Chemical Warfare Service's most secret project in the Central Pacific area. His mission: develop a weapon system capable of neutralizing Japanese cave and bunker complexes that had proven immune to conventional weapons. The colonel's initial team was small, just the 43rd Chemical Laboratory Company. But Unmarked understood the magnitude of his task required exceptional talent. He requisitioned 25 men from the 117th Naval Construction Battalion. The Seabees, whose mechanical genius and practical engineering skills were legendary throughout the Pacific. He added personnel from the 5th Marine Tank Battalion and the 81st Ordnance Company, creating a unique joint service team, united by a single purpose: build a weapon that could burn the Japanese out of their caves. Leading the technical development were machinist mate First Class A.L. Reichert and electricians mate Second Class Joseph Kessel, two Seabees whose names would never appear in headlines, but whose innovation would save thousands of American lives. These men brought practical battlefield experience from previous island campaigns. They had seen Marines die trying to assault fortified positions that artillery couldn't destroy. They understood the problem wasn't firepower, it was applying that firepower effectively against an enemy fighting from underground. The challenge was daunting. Previous attempts to mount flamethrowers on tanks had produced mixed results. The Army's initial designs were crude field modifications. The Canadian Ronson system had a range limited to 60 to 80 yards, with thickened fuel. Fuel capacity allowed only 30 to 40 seconds of total fire. The resulting weapon, designated CBH-1 Construction Battalion Hawaii 1, represented a quantum leap in flamethrower technology. Installation required 150 pounds of welding rod and 1,100 electrical connections, each one critical to the weapon's function. The conversion took 1,200 man-hours per tank. The technical specifications were revolutionary. The CBH-1 operated at 300 pounds per square inch pressure, triple that of previous designs. Maximum range extended to 150 yards with thickened fuel, nearly 3 times the distance of portable flamethrowers. The fuel mixture, a carefully calibrated blend of diesel fuel, gasoline, and napalm thickener, would burn at 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit. The system could maintain continuous fire for up to 80 seconds, though doctrine recommended bursts of 2 to 3 seconds to conserve fuel and maintain accuracy. Most critically, the flamethrower replaced the tank's main gun, allowing full traverse of 270 degrees and elevation from -10 to +35 degrees through the tank's existing fire control systems. The gunner could aim the flame weapon as accurately as a conventional cannon. The 8M4, a 3 flamethrower tanks, landed on Iwo Jima's beaches on February 19th, D-Day, mixed among the regular Sherman tanks. The D-Day official Marine Corps designation was M4A3R3. They came ashore in the 5th wave around 1000 hours after the beaches had been marginally secured. For the first 24 hours, the flamethrower tanks sat idle near the beach, while Marines died by the hundreds trying to advance against invisible Japanese positions. On the morning of February 20th, D+1, The situation was desperate. The 21st Marine Regiment was pinned down, attempting to cross Motoyama Airfield No. 1. 3 concrete pillboxes dominated the approach, their interlocking machine gun fire creating a kill zone 200 yards wide. Lieutenant Colonel William Duplantis, commanding the 3rd Battalion, 21st Marines, made the decision that would change the battle's trajectory. He called for the flamethrower tanks. At 14:20 hours, the first M4, a 3R3 flamethrower tank, entered combat. Tank number 431, commanded by Staff Sergeant Robert Meza, a veteran of Saipan and Tinian, approached the Japanese positions from an oblique angle. To Japanese observers, it appeared to be another standard Sherman attempting the same failed assault. The tank's approach was cautious. Meza understood that surprise would be their only advantage. At 125 yards from the nearest pillbox, Meza gave the order: "Gunner, flamethrower, pillbox, fire." The CBH-1 flamethrower erupted with a sound witnesses described as the devil's own blowtorch. A stream of napalm-thickened fuel oil arced through the air, propelled by compressed nitrogen. The burning liquid struck the pillbox aperture with devastating accuracy, splashing through the machine gun port and flowing inside like lava. The effect was instantaneous and horrifying. Temperatures inside the concrete structure soared past 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit in seconds. The oxygen was consumed so rapidly that Japanese soldiers suffocated before the flames reached them. Those who survived the initial blast attempted to flee through rear exits, only to be cut down by Marine riflemen. Sergeant Meza traversed the turret 30 degrees and engaged the second pillbox. This time, the defenders were ready. A Japanese 47mm anti-tank gun fired point-blank, the shell striking the Sherman's frontal armor and ricocheting skyward. The tank shuddered, but continued advancing. Gunner Corporal Thomas Carlson triggered another burst, maintaining fire for 15 seconds until black smoke billowed from every aperture of the fortification. With the 3rd pillbox neutralized, Marines of the 21st Regiment advanced 400 yards in 2 hours. Word spread rapidly through the Marine communications network. The flamethrower tanks worked. More importantly, they survived where conventional tanks failed. Within 6 hours, all 8 flamethrower tanks were in action across the front. The tactical revolution was immediate and profound. Tank number 434, supporting the 23rd Marines near the East Boat Basin, destroyed 4 fortified positions in a single afternoon. The crew developed a technique called corkscrew and burn, approaching in a spiral pattern to avoid anti-tank fire while maintaining continuous flame suppression. The psychological effect was as devastating as the physical destruction. Japanese soldiers who had been trained to die at their posts began fleeing positions when they saw the flame tanks approaching, abandoning fortifications rather than face incineration. Tank number 437 pioneered breach and clear tactics with the 24th Marines. The flamethrower would first neutralize a position's defenders. Then Marine engineers would rush forward with demolition charges to permanently destroy the fortification. This combination proved devastatingly effective against positions that had resisted days of conventional assault. But it was tank number 432 that demonstrated the weapon's true psychological impact. Supporting the 26th Marines near the base of Mount Suribachi, the tank approached a complex of interconnected caves. Commander Sergeant William Patterson ordered his driver to stop 100 yards from the cave entrances. Through the tank's periscope, Patterson could see Japanese soldiers watching from the darkness. Patterson triggered a short burst of flame into the air, a demonstration. The psychological effect was immediate and unprecedented. Japanese soldiers began fleeing from rear exits, abandoning positions they had been ordered to defend to the death. Marine riflemen were so surprised they initially failed to fire on the retreating enemy. In 30 minutes, an entire defensive sector collapsed without the tank firing a shot directly at enemy positions. This represented the first mass abandonment of defensive positions in Japanese military history. By nightfall on February 20th, Marine units were already modifying their tactics around flamethrower tank availability. Attack plans were postponed until flame tanks could be brought forward. Infantry units learned to follow 50 yards behind the tanks, close enough to exploit the shock effect, but far enough to avoid the heat blast. The numbers from the first day of flame tank combat were striking. 47 fortified positions destroyed. Marine casualties in supported sectors down 40% from the previous day. 600 yards of territory gained in areas that had been static for 48 hours. But the most significant statistic was psychological. For the first time, significant numbers of Japanese soldiers were abandoning positions rather than dying at their posts. The Japanese response was swift, but largely ineffective. General Kuribayashi issued emergency orders that night, designating the flame tanks as priority targets. All available 47mm anti-tank guns were to concentrate fire on these vehicles. Special assault teams were organized. Volunteers who would attack with explosive charges strapped to their bodies. Infantry units were instructed to target flame tanks' vision blocks with concentrated rifle fire, hoping to blind the crews. But the fundamental problem remained insurmountable. The flamethrower tanks looked identical to regular Shermans until they fired. Japanese gunners couldn't identify priority targets until it was too late. Worse, focusing on flame tanks meant ignoring conventional tanks that provided covering fire. The Americans had achieved tactical surprise through mechanical innovation. By early March, the flamethrower tanks had evolved into the centerpiece of a combined arms system. Each flame tank operated with a dedicated support team, conventional tanks for suppressing enemy anti-tank guns, infantry for close protection, engineers for obstacle clearance. On February 23rd, D+4, the same day, Marines raised the flag on Mount Suribachi. The flamethrower tanks faced their greatest test. The 3rd Marine Division was attempting to capture Hill 382, the second highest point on Iwo Jima and the main cornerstone of Kuribayashi's northern defenses. The hill was honeycombed with bunkers and tunnels reaching 7 stories underground. Japanese defenders had pre-registered every approach with artillery and mortars. The position had been designed by Japanese engineers to be impregnable. Multiple defensive lines, interlocking fields of fire, underground galleries, allowing defenders to reappear behind attackers. Previous assaults had failed, with casualties exceeding 50%. The 1st Battalion, 9th Marines, had lost 70% of its strength, attempting to take just the approaches to the hill. At 0800 hours, 4 flamethrower tanks advanced in echelon formation, supported by 6 conventional Shermans and a battalion of Marine infantry. This time, the Japanese were ready. Hidden 75mm mountain guns, larger than the standard 47mm anti-tank weapons, had been positioned specifically to engage flame tanks. As the lead flame tank crested the first rise, concentrated fire erupted from 3 concealed positions. The first round struck Tank 433's track, immobilizing it. The crew continued firing the flamethrower while stationary, creating a curtain of flame that obscured following vehicles and suppressed Japanese positions. This self-sacrifice allowed the other tanks to maneuver. Tank number 431 pushed through the smoke, advancing through artillery fire that would have stopped an infantry assault cold. Shell fragments rattled against the armor like hail. At 60 yards from the main Japanese bunker complex, Tank 434's flamethrower erupted. But this time, the Japanese had adapted. Engineers had installed steel plates over bunker apertures that could be closed between machine gun bursts. The flame splashed harmlessly against sealed steel. It seemed the Japanese had found a counter to the flame tanks. Gunner Corporal Michael Rodriguez made a critical observation. The steel plates glowed cherry red after sustained flame contact. Metal that hot would warp, creating gaps. Rodriguez maintained fire for 45 seconds, far longer than doctrine recommended, dangerously depleting fuel reserves. The steel plate buckled. The incendiary mixture poured through the gaps. The bunker's interior became an inferno. Ammunition cooked off in explosive chains. Concrete cracked from thermal shock. Secondary explosions revealed the tunnel entrances Japanese engineers had carefully concealed. Marine infantry rushed forward with satchel charges, throwing explosives into every opening before the defenders could reorganize. In 3 hours, Hill 382's outer defenses had been breached. The impregnable position was falling. By mid-March, the flamethrower tanks had consumed 360,000 gallons of fuel mixture, destroying over 1,000 fortified positions. Post-action analysis credited them with reducing American casualties by an estimated 5,000 men. But perhaps most significantly, they had broken the myth of Japanese invincibility in defensive positions. Statistical analysis revealed the true impact. Over 30% of Japanese casualties on Iwo Jima were caused by flame weapons, both tank-mounted and portable. In sectors where flame tanks operated, the rate of advance increased by 300% compared to unsupported attacks. Japanese prisoners, a rarity in Pacific battles, numbered 216, more than the combined total from Tarawa, Saipan, and Peleliu. Many specifically cited fear of burning alive as their reason for surrendering. Captain Frank Caldwell, commanding Company F, 26th Marines, provided perhaps the most succinct assessment. It was the flame tank, more than any other supporting arm, that won this battle. Artillery, naval gunfire, and aerial bombardment could not rout the Japanese from their underground fortresses. The flamethrower tanks did what nothing else could. But the price of victory was becoming apparent on both sides. Crews reported severe psychological trauma from their role in the slaughter. Corporal Carlson of Tank 431 later testified, "You could hear them screaming when the flame hit. Not for long, but you heard it. Sometimes at night, I still hear it." We did what we had to do, but I'll never forget the smell. Burning flesh, mixed with sulfur from the volcanic rock. Maintenance crews found human remains fused to tank tracks, requiring blowtorches to remove. The tanks themselves were deteriorating under the constant stress of combat. Transmissions failed from the strain of operating in volcanic ash. Fuel lines clogged with carbon deposits from the napalm mixture. By late March, keeping even 4 tanks operational required cannibalizing parts from damaged vehicles. On March 26, 1945, Iwo Jima was declared secure. The battle had lasted 36 days instead of the projected 5. American casualties totaled 26,038, including 6,821 killed. Japanese losses were nearly total. Of approximately 21,000 defenders, only 216 survived as prisoners. The rest died fighting or, in increasing numbers as the battle progressed, by suicide rather than face capture or death by flame. The flamethrower tanks had revolutionized the battle's dynamics. They had destroyed over 1,000 fortified positions, consumed 360,000 gallons of fuel mixture, and fundamentally changed Marine Corps assault doctrine. Many tank crew members struggled with what would later be recognized as post-traumatic stress disorder. The memory of human beings turned to ash, of screams cut short by consuming flame, haunted men who had done what duty demanded. Sergeant Meza never spoke of his service until shortly before his death in 1993, telling his grandson, "We did what we had to do." Nobody should be proud of burning men alive, but those tanks saved a lot of Marine lives. That's what I try to remember. The Japanese perspective emerged slowly through prisoner interrogations and captured documents. Soldiers who had been taught that death in battle guaranteed spiritual transcendence found themselves paralyzed by the fear of incineration. The dishonor of fleeing from combat positions seemed preferable to dying in underground ovens. This psychological collapse contributed to the first large-scale surrenders in Japanese military history. Lieutenant Yamada, who had witnessed the first flamethrower tank attack on February 20th, survived the battle as one of the 216 prisoners. In post-war testimony to American intelligence officers, he reflected, "We had prepared for every form of death bullets, shells, bayonets, starvation. We had not prepared for burning petroleum that sought us out in our deepest bunkers." The flame tanks broke our spirit in ways no conventional weapon could. They turned our greatest strength, our underground fortifications, into our tombs. Former Sergeant Masao Hayashi, captured after being burned while fleeing a bunker, provided graphic testimony. The napalm came like a flood, pouring into every space. Men tried to escape through emergency exits, but found more flames waiting. Some shot themselves rather than burn. Others ran into American gunfire, preferring bullets to incineration. I saw warriors who had fought since China refused to enter positions after seeing flame tanks approaching. This was not the death we had trained for. The transformation represented by the flamethrower tanks extended into the post-war period. The United States Marine Corps, analyzing the success at Iwo Jima, fundamentally restructured its assault doctrine around combined arms tactics, integrating armor, infantry, and engineers. The concept of specialized armor for specific battlefield problems became standard military thinking. Future weapons development would prioritize adaptability, and innovation over pure firepower. General Kurebayashi's final message, transmitted just before his death in late March 1945, contained a prescient observation. The Americans have not just defeated us with superior numbers or firepower, they have defeated us with superior imagination. Turning our greatest strength, our underground fortifications, into death traps, future wars will belong to nations that can imagine new forms of warfare, not those who perfect old ones. His prediction proved accurate. The revolution in military affairs that began with 8 flame tanks at Iwo Jima continued through guided missiles, precision weapons, and cyber warfare. The principle remained constant. Technological innovation defeats traditional tactics. Imagination triumphs over convention. The 8 M4A3R3 flamethrower tanks that fought at Iwo Jima were ultimately machines. Steel, aluminum, rubber, and mechanical components assembled by workers who would never see combat. Yet, they represented something larger, the mobilization of American industrial might, scientific innovation, and mechanical genius in service of victory. The Seabees who built them, the Marines who crewed them, and the Japanese who died facing them were all part of a transformation that would define modern warfare. Today, the last surviving flamethrower tank from Iwo Jima sits in the National Museum of the Marine Corps in Quantico, Virginia. Tank number 434 bears the scars of its service, welding marks where armor was patched, dents from shell impacts, scratches from volcanic rock. A small plaque notes its specifications and battle history. What it cannot convey is the sound of compressed nitrogen releasing, the smell of burning napalm mixed with sulfur, the sight of liquid fire flowing into underground fortresses. The last reunion of Iwo Jima flame tank veterans was held in 2015 on the battle's 70th anniversary. Only 3 crew members attended, all in their 90s. Corporal Anthony Vitelli, former gunner on Tank 436, offered perhaps the most poignant observation. People ask if I'm proud of what we did. Pride isn't the right word. We did a terrible job that had to be done. Those tanks saved Marine lives. That's enough. In 36 days of combat, 8 flamethrower tanks had validated a new form of warfare, saved thousands of American lives, and contributed to victory in one of World War II's most crucial battles.